Every year at the Nuremberg Toy Fair in Germany, people of play gather to see what the next toy to grab the spotlight might be. For 44 years, a company called Nextoy has been chasing that spotlight and finding it. This is the Robert Fuhrer edition of Where's the Fun From? Robert Fuhrer has been immersed in toys his whole life because fun is a family affair. Robert's younger brother David is a successful toy designer too. Both men take after their father Len, who worked for Matchbox in the late 1960s. Robert and David even lent their hands to their dad on the cover of this Matchbox Motorway from 1967. Len next went to work for Topper Toys, makers of the Secret Sam line of spy toys, which included the memorable Six Finger and Robert's favorite toy as a kid, the Secret Sam attaché case. By the 1970s, when his dad was selling model rockets for Estée Industries, Robert was as well versed in toys as any 16-year-old could be, and would read the toy trade magazines his father would bring home from work. His first foray into design came when his father presented a challenge. "Can you come up with an idea to make model rockets appeal to younger kids?" he asked. Robert thought about it and offered, "Why don't you design a rocket to look like a foot and call it a mistletoe?" Len was surprised at his son's creativity, and then Robert was surprised that Estes decided to do it. His mistletoe became a part of the Goonie Birds, launched in 1973. These ridiculous rockets sputtered to the ground, but Robert was hooked. After college, he went to work as a product manager for Othello, the Japanese two-player strategy game. For 4 years, he built the Othello brand in the US and fostered Japanese business relationships abroad. In 1981, he ventured out on his own and opened an office in the fabled 205th Avenue Toy Center in New York City. Through his Othello contacts in Japan, he was introduced to Tak Shimokata, a Japanese executive from the Asahi Corporation. Tak met Robert in the hopes of finding a U.S. toy company to distribute a line of cars for which Asahi had the rights. The clever vehicles required no batteries, but once they were wound up, would rumble and shake until the hood was closed and then magically take off. Eventually, the line found a home at Ertl, who released it as Shakers in '84. A year later, Smokin' Shakers was released. Robert Fuhrer had produced his first hit toy line at the tender age of 27. In 1985, Robert met Mike Myers from Milton Bradley. The two hit it off, and Robert sold him on a line from Asahi called Things. Released in '86, the line sold well enough that Milton Bradley expanded it 2 years in a row. The success of the line established Fuhrer as a source for skill and action games. Skill and action was a growing category of games in the mid-'80s. They featured plastic injection molded parts and mechanized gameplay that created excitement. Typified by games like Hands Down by Ideal, Mr. Mouth by Tomy, and Hungry Hungry Hippos by Milton Bradley. These were games designed for multiple players, something that the single-player Things line lacked. So Robert created Bongo Congo and Rattle Me Bones for Ideal in 1989. But it was his next product that took a huge bite out of the sales of all other skill and action games in the early 90s.
Help me, my toothache! No worries, I'm the Crocodile Dentist. I'll fix that smile, you crocodile. I'm the Crocodile Dentist.
Parker Brothers was the first to see Crocodile Dentist and rejected it as too similar to a game called Feed Me. But when Fuhrer showed the prototype to David Fear from Hasbro, he slapped the table at Toy Fair and said, "My God, it's a classic." Hasbro released Crocodile Dentist through Milton Bradley at the 1990 Toy Fair. The game came with toy pliers and a croc that would lurch forward and startle kids when they pulled the wrong tooth. Bolstered by the hit movie franchise Crocodile Dundee, Crocodile Dentist was the hit game of '91. Over the years, the game appeared on TV game shows and spun off into a travel version, a world's smallest version, a splash version, and sold in countries all over the world. Evidence for the popularity of Crocodile Dentist is the sheer number of toothy knockoffs on the market. Today, the pliers and the lurching are gone, but the Croc's chomp still brings belly laughs. A spin-off of the hit game Shark Attack called Shark Attack Bowling inspired Fuhrer to consider making a Crocodile Dentist golf game. But when the bowling game tanked, the golf game was shelved. Fuhrer credits an industrial designer from Milton Bradley named Phil Grant for sticking with the concept. The game was finally released in 1994.
Gator Golf, give it a whack. Gator Golf, throw it right back. Gator Golf.
Gator Golf was another home run. With back-to-back smash hits, Robert Fuhrer found himself nearly as famous as his games. The game has sold for over 30 years and is now made by Goliath, a global toy company from the Netherlands. Another game designed to lurch forward and surprise kids was based on a comatose canine. It became a hit game for Goliath called Mad Dog. Fuhrer's success was recognized in '95 when he received the Idiot Award. The acronym stands for International Designer and Inventor of Toys, and is a tribute to creators who have made outstanding contributions to the toy industry. In 2003, a toy agent brought Fuhrer a top that digitally displayed the number of rotations it made. The high-tech toy sensed the Earth's magnetic field and counted every time it passed magnetic north. Robert loved it, and within days of pitching it, he had two bidders: Mattel, the largest toy company in the world, and Irwin Toys, the oldest toy company in Canada. In 2003, George Irwin, grandson of the company's founder, brought the legendary toy firm out of bankruptcy. He wanted this dazzling digital concept to be the tentpole toy of the company's reboot. Fuhrer agreed and chose Irwin, who launched the iTop. Robert sees himself as a producer of playthings, in the same way a producer in Hollywood gets movies made. After hearing stories of the tumultuous track his toys often take to get to market, it's no doubt true. Fuhrer is a professional problem solver. Sometimes the biggest problem a producer has to overcome is their own doubts. At the peak of his connection with his Asian partners, Robert would travel to Japan 4 or 5 times a year. In 2007, he caught wind of a new math puzzle which was taking Japan by storm. When he first saw it, he doubted it was anything special. In 2003, a Japanese math teacher named Tetsuya Miyamoto devised an arithmetic and logic puzzle similar to Sudoku, which had exploded in popularity a year earlier. This puzzle had an added challenge of an outline group of cells called cages. The numbers in each cage had to produce a certain target number when combined using a specified mathematical operation. It sounded so elaborate, it was easy to miss its elegance. Miyamoto called it Kashikoku Naru Puzzle-ru, which means a puzzle that makes you smarter. Eventually, a much shorter Japanese expression, loosely translated cleverness squared, inspired the name KenKen. The puzzles got the attention of Gawken, an educational publisher. They struck a deal and released the puzzles in book form in 2006. To everyone's shock, Gawken sold 1.3 million KenKen books across Japan. Fuhrer admits that he didn't get KenKen at first, but eventually the simplicity converted him. Because you had to play it to get it, he knew he needed to get the puzzles in newspapers. Enter Will Shortz, the famed New York Times puzzle editor. Through a mutual friend named Mark Ducati, a magician and game designer with whom Fuhrer had collaborated, Robert set up a meeting. Shortz tried a few puzzles and then asked Fuhrer to leave him the Gawken book he had brought to the meeting. A few days later in an email, he said that he had solved 103 of the 105 puzzles in the book and couldn't put it down. Then it was Shortz who set up a meeting for Fuhrer with the New York Times. But after the meeting resulted in a lukewarm reception, Fuhrer was resigned to the fact that the dream of getting these puzzles in newspapers was probably dead. Around that time, he met with a former colleague and computer chess programmer named David Levy to discuss another project. An off-the-cuff comment by Levy at the end of the meeting would change the trajectory of KenKen forever. Levy was visiting New York and mentioned that he had to get back to London because he was running a Sudoku tournament for the Times of London newspaper. Astonished at the synchronicity of the moment, Fuhrer showed him KenKen and convinced Levy to pitch the puzzle to the legendary London newspaper. The Times of London loved KenKen and wanted to release it right away, but the producer in Robert Fuhrer saw a problem. He only had a few hundred KenKen puzzles that Miyamoto created and knew that the mathematician would never be able to make puzzles fast enough should KenKen take off. So he asked Levy if he could program software that generated KenKen puzzles. Levy said it could be done, but it wouldn't be cheap. While Levy hired a programming partner and got to work solving the puzzle problem, Fuhrer confronted the cost concerns. An editor at Gawken's international division named Nikki Yashimura had studied in the US and was fluent in English and Japanese. She was crucial in helping translate communications between Ta Kubadera, Gawken's division head, and Fuhrer. The negotiation featured a loan from Gawken, Fuhrer's personal guarantee to pay it back within 3 years, and many other deal points. But when the dust settled, Nextoy was the owner of KenKen. Shortly before the Times of London launched KenKen, Fuhrer got a call from an editor at St. Martin's Press, who was told of KenKen by Will Shortz. He met her in the legendary Flatiron Building in New York, just across the street from his old Toy Center office. There, Fuhrer cut a 10-book deal with St. Martin's Press for Will Shortz Presents KenKen. On Easter weekend in 2008, the Times of London launched the puzzle. Then Fuhrer landed Reader's Digest. Then the New York Times had a sudden change of heart, and on February 9, 2009, KenKen debuted in the most read newspaper in the world. Today, KenKen is syndicated in 200 publications around the globe, and an international championship has been held each year since 2010. KenKen.com welcomes 2 million visitors each year. Celebrity KenKen fans include Martha Stewart and Bill Clinton, who Robert first met through his role as board director for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. For years, Robert organized and hosted charity golf tournaments for his local chapter, which raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for the charity. In 2021, Fuhrer founded the International KenKen Puzzle Federation, a nonprofit that promotes the global love of mathematics, learning, and logic. He brought in a longtime friend and Harvard Business School graduate named Jerry March to run the business side of KenKen, a side that saw March introduce Miyamoto for a keynote speech at Google headquarters in 2017. And in 2021, The New Yorker produced a documentary film on Tetsuya Miyamoto and his puzzles. With no sign of slowing down, it's evident that KenKen truly is cleverness squared. Perhaps it's his producer's spirit, but Fuhrer credits numerous collaborations and customers for his continued successes. All these games were co-designed with Mark Ducati. Some of these through Tak Shimokata and the team at Asahi, and the rest through Mike Myers, Phil Grant, and David Fear at Hasbro. And KenKen's global success begins with Tetsuya Miyamoto, and then Tak Kubadera and Niki Yoshimura at Gawken, but expands through Will Shortz, David Levy, Jerry March, and on and on. Robert points to these human relationships with people he's had the blessing to work with as his creative superpower. And then there's his relationship with Adi Golad. Golad founded Goliath Games in 1980 and first met Fuhrer in the mid-90s when he licensed Mad Dog and the Litterbugs game. Adi's team got Litterbugs featured on Channel 4's The Big Breakfast Show out of the UK. The subsequent sales were the spark that took his company from a Dutch startup to a global Goliath. And it wasn't just games. Goliath relaunched the iTop in 2018. Then an artist and animator named Rufus Butler Cedar saw the toy and approached Fuhrer with an idea to turn it into an animated drawing toy. The two partnered to create and license the Spirograph Animator. The toy, which took this 1960s classic into the future, was nominated for a TAGGY Award in 2021. But his biggest toy might be one that was launched just last year, one that had been in development for nearly a decade. In the fall of 2020, Robert got a call from Yair Shiloh, a talented engineer from Israel. Shiloh was looking for someone who had worked with Hasbro, the company who had the master toy license for Star Wars. Fuhrer's name was at the top of the list. On the call, Shiloh explained his obsessive Star Wars fandom and the engineering behind his 5-year journey working on his holy grail of toys. A fully extendable and retractable lightsaber that could be struck by another and not break. Impressed by his tenacity and the prototype that Shiloh demoed on the video call, Fuhrer secured an option with Hasbro to develop the idea. For close to 2 years, despite everyone at Hasbro's best efforts, the project kept getting derailed.
You don't know the power of the dark side.
There were issues with cost, price point, strike tests, hilt to blade ratio, the pandemic, and plain old bad timing. In 2022, the rights reverted back to Shiloh and Nextoy. By that time, Yair and his team had filed a patent on his telescopic item and mechanism therefore. It didn't read like a very cool toy, but it sure looked and sounded the part. Without a Star Wars license, many companies wouldn't have launched such an elaborate, expensive toy. The team Robert assembled saw the potential beyond the challenges and believed that the iconic nature of this fantastical movie weapon made it instantly recognizable, no matter what it was called. When the toy was released by Goliath in 2024, it included awesome lights and sound effects, sold for $60, and was called
Power Saber, the first automatic saber in the world. The power is in your hands.
Robert's son Alex Fuhrer started working for Nextoy in 2016 and was instrumental in getting the Power Saber featured on social media. When a TikToker named That Star Wars Guy got a hold of a Power Saber, his 15-second Jedi skills display went viral, reaching over 43 million views and sending thousands of Star Wars fans to stores looking for the toy. And in November of 2024, Shiloh and Nextoy won the Taggy Award for Toy Innovator of the Year for Goliath's Power Saber. In celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Rubik's Cube in 2025, Sam Fuhrer joined his brother Alex and a business partner to form Nextoy Digital. The team struck a deal with Spin Master, Doodles, and the man himself, Erno Rubik, to create Rubik's Cube NFTs, limited edition cubes, and other digital collectibles. Of all the collaborations Robert Fuhrer has negotiated, his most fruitful is his marriage to Judy, a partnership that's resulted in his most cherished success, family. After 44 years as a producer of Playthings, Robert Fuhrer shows no sign of slowing down. I asked him if he had any cool things in the works, and he just smiled. I can't wait to see what's next for Nextoy. Thanks for watching. Remember, life is short. Seize the play.